Hey, good morning, everyone. So I was gonna do this earlier this week, but I've been sick all week. I probably will sound awful if you you hear this. So I haven't really had much time to read or do anything really. But I did finally get a chapter out of Lord of the Rings read, so we're gonna do this here the best I can. Um, So, Lord of the Rings is split into 6 books, and then you have the appendices at the end. The Fellowship of the Ring is books 1 and 2, 3 and 4 is the Two Towers, 5 and 6, Return of the King. Now, one volume editions of the book have been made, like what I have here, but originally they had to have him publish it as 3 because there was a problem with. There was a paper shortage, and this is, of course, during the Korean War, post World War II. So paper was kind of expensive. So if the Fellowship did well, they'd publish the Two Towers and then the Return of the King, and that's exactly what happened. And of course, in the '60s, they finally came out with the one-volume edition, and so they continued to publish that and the original trilogy, even though Lord of the Rings is not technically a trilogy, because it's one story split into 3 books, not 3 different stories, as it should be with a trilogy. But anyway, chapter 1 is a long-expected party, whereas before we had the first chapter of The Hobbit was an unexpected party. Unexpected journey. Or was a party? Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I've been sick, so like I said. But anyway, it begins when Mr. Bilbo Baggins of Bag End announced that he would shortly be celebrating his 11st birthday with a party of special magnificence. There was much talk and excitement in Hobbiton. Bilbo was very rich and very peculiar, and had been the wonder of the Shire for 60 years, ever since his remarkable disappearance and unexpected return. As you remember from the end of The Hobbit, they thought he was dead. He came back in the middle of an auction, had to buy back a lot of his stuff. But he came back with chests and bags of treasure that he got on his journey. And so, there was rumors going around among the hobbits that he had holes just stuffed with jewels and stuff. Not true, of course. He didn't really bring back that much. It was 2 small chests and a couple of bags. Now, hobbits can live to be about 100, sometimes over. You have the Old Took, who is the oldest living hobbit at 130. And so when he's 90, Bilbo's 99, they're like, well, wait a minute. He doesn't really look that old. And as you know, of course, this is the power of the One Ring. It preserves your life as far as it can stretch, and then you become a wraith. Or you become like Gollum if you're a hobbit. There were some that shook their heads and thought this was too much of a good thing. It seemed unfair that anyone should possess, apparently, perpetual youth as well as reputedly inexhaustible wealth. It will have to be paid for, they said. It isn't natural, and trouble will come of it. But so far, that did not happen. Obviously, his return after his disappearance hurt the Sackville Bagginses. And of course, here we finally learn that, of course, the town he lives in is Hobbiton, that his home is called Bag End. We don't hear that in The Hobbit. Now, Bag End was the name of the home that Tolkien's Aunt Jane lived in, because it was at the end of a cul-de-sac. In Lord of the Rings Lord of the Rings Reader's Companion. Why do I keep forgetting the name of the book? They talk about this, and they quote from scholar Tom Shippey, who wrote The Road to Middle-earth, in another book called Tolkien, Author of the Century. And the quote here is, cul-de-sacs are at once funny and infuriating. They belong to no language, since the French call such a thing an impasse, and the English a dead end. The word has its origins in snobbery, the faint residual feeling that English words, ever since the Norman conquest, have been low, and that French ones, even Frenchified ones, would be better. Cul-de-sac is accordingly a peculiar, ridiculous piece of English feeling, and Bag-End a defiantly English reaction to it. As for Mr. Baggins, one thing he is more partial to than another is his tea, which he has at 4 o'clock. But over much of the country, tea, indeed anything eaten between meals, but especially afternoon tea in a substantial form, as the OED says, is called Baggins. The OED prefers the politer form bagging, but Tolkien himself knew that people who use words like that were almost certain to drop the terminal G, another post-conquest confusion anyway. He would have found the term glossed under baggin in W.H. Haig's New Glossary of the Dialect of the Huddersfield District, London, Oxford University Press, for which he had written an appreciative prologue in 1928. So yeah, she lived in what we call a cul-de-sac, and this is where Bag-End is, and it's at the top of the hill, and then you have all the places, like the Hobbit homes below that, and it's a big hill, or as they call it, the hill, where all these homes are built into. And so we hear what Baggins is, where he talks here about the origin of the name Baggins, which I think Bilbo itself is a Spanish name, comes from Bilba, as Tolkien explains in Appendix F. But anyway, so Bilbo's about to celebrate his 111st birthday with a party of special magnificence, as said, and a bunch of people are invited, a bunch of their families that they are related to from different parts of the Shire come. 111st is kind of an odd way of saying 111, but and it mentions, Tolkien mentions that he was on friendly terms with all of his relatives, especially his nieces and his younger nieces and nephews, except, of course, the Sackville Bagginses. Like I said, they were upset they didn't get Bag-End like they wanted. And then, of course, Bilbo adopts Frodo as his heir, and Otho Sackville Baggins does not like that because he should have been the heir. And so, yeah. Of course, Frodo is celebrating his 33rd year, which, for the Hobbits, that's becoming an adult now. And, or as the Hobbits call the age from being a teenager up to 33, they call that tweens. In between, adult and child, and so are Hobbits not fully mature until 30? And of course, as the preparations are being made, there is, at an inn in a pub, you have Hamfast Gamgee, or the Gaffer, who is the father of Samwise Gamgee, that we will meet. So he's in the ivy bush talking to some other hobbits. It mentions that they lived on the hill Sam and his dad. They lived on the hill itself in number 3, Bagshot Row, just below Bag-End. So they're neighbors. Hamfast is basically Bilbo's gardener. And of course Sam, since he's now getting old, it kind of is doing a lot of the work now, taking over from his father. And anyway, these hobbits are talking about, all the supposed treasure that's in Bag-End. Frodo is half a brandy buck, and brandy bucks are they're weird because they're on the other side of the river. They're not in the Shire proper, and they like to row boats. That hobbits don't like that. They hate swimming. They hate the water. And they start talking about Frodo's parents. Frodo is an orphan, and see, Tolkien himself and his brother were orphans. They lost their dad when they were really, really little, and by the time they were becoming teenagers, they lost their mom. And they were taken care of by a priest. And so they, were in boarding school and stuff like that. But anyway, there are some fan theories about what happened to Frodo's parents. They are obviously in the book here, it says that they drowned, and the hobbits have their own little theories of what happened. There's a fan theory that Gollum had made his way to the Shire and mistook Drogo, Frodo's father, for Bilbo and killed him and killed his wife as well. Tolkien never says anything about that, so it's just speculation. It's a theory, like I said, but I kind of like that theory. And of course, the hobbits were talking here. Well, Drogo was really fat, so it was probably his weight that sunk the boat. There was mention of a miller whose last name is Sandyman. Now, Tolkien, when he was a kid, him and his brother, there was a mill in one of the towns that they lived in, and they would go play near there or whatever, and they did not like the miller that was there. And so you see here in the book, Hamfast Gamgee, obviously, he doesn't really like the miller either. And the miller has a son, Ted Sandyman, that we will meet later. Character that is in the Lord of the Rings movies, but he doesn't get a name there. And he's not an evil character there. But in the book, he is. But, we'll get to that. But anyway, Bilbo's kind of weird too. But Ham is like, Bilbo's always been really nice to me, and he's a gentle hobbit, which is a play on gentlemen. But since they're hobbits, not men, you see that it's. I always thought that was funny. And of course, in the middle of all this, Gandalf shows up with fireworks and all kinds of stuff. So all these carts start rolling in of things, and there is a field with this big tree that they're gonna have this big birthday party for Bilbo in. And so the party comes. Now you see in the movie where Merry and Pippin light off a firework that looks like a dragon. That was for the movie. Now that does happen in the book, but it's not Merry and Pippin. It's Gandalf lights it off, and as Bilbo says, "Oh, that's the signal for supper." That's just his way of telling him, "Hey, supper's ready," So they have this big party, but then they have a smaller one just for the real close relatives later that night. And Bilbo gets up, as you remember from the movie, and he makes a speech and everything, and let's see, get some. I think I mentioned everything I was supposed to mention so far. There was something, but I can't remember. And they do explain how Frodo, Merry, Pippin, Bilbo are all related, and it's pretty cool that they're basically, they come from the children of the Old Took. Bilbo being the Old Took's actual grandson, and then Merry and Pippin, I believe, and Frodo are great-grandchildren, something like that. But, and of course, we get all these different hobbit names. Boffins, Tooks, Brandybucks, Grubs, Chubbs, Burrowses, Hornblowers, Bulgers, Bracegirdles, Goodbodies, Brockhouses, Proudfoots, and that elderly hobbit shouts, "Proud feet!" just like in the movie. That hobbit, of course, his name is... I know it says it in here what his name is. His last name is obviously Proudfoot. He has a first name. Odo Proudfoot, I think is what it is. And he's in the movie. You see him in the movie too, like that scene where Gandalf, shows up and lights the fireworks for the children. An old dude that's laughing. I believe that's him. Yes, it is, because when you see him at the party, he does exclaim the same thing. And he makes his speech or whatever. There's a saying that the hobbits have. They call 144 of something one gross. You don't use it of people. Bilbo does. 111 plus 33 is 144, or one gross, and that's how many people they invite to the last little party there. where he makes a speech, and Bilbo insults the hobbits. And of course he mentions, it's Frodo's coming of age, and Sackville Baggins is like, oh, wait a minute. So yeah, sorry, y'all are screwed. You don't get Bag End. I know you want it, but sorry. But of course, you get the speech just like in the movie. Bilbo disappears, of course. Gandalf adds a little blinding flash to give them something to talk about and to throw them off. Anyone that might be curious about that ring, because nobody knows about the ring. Bilbo has kept that ring hidden pretty well, and doesn't think anyone else knows about it. He thinks. But he disappears. Frodo stays at the party for a little bit, and things wind down, and he sends everybody home. Well, yeah, he says he gave orders for more wine to be served, and he got up and drained his own glass silently to the health of Bilbo and slipped out of the pavilion. And of course, Bilbo goes back to Bag End and meets with Gandalf there. And that's when you have the whole thing where Bilbo starts acting funny. He starts getting angry at Gandalf. Why are you pestering me about this ring? You never bothered me about anything else that I got on my journey, and it's my precious. And he's like, oh wait, Gollum used to call it that. And he's like, well, I don't care what he said. I ain't no thief, whatever he said. He may have said it once, but I say this now. Gandalf, of course, is suspicious, as you know, that something about the ring isn't right. Bilbo got a magic ring, he won it in a game, and it was someone's birthday present. It all seems a little funny, right? And then now with Bilbo acting the way that he's acting, he even mentions, Bilbo does, that he feels like the ring is like an eye looking at him. Get it? More on that later, of course. But Bilbo does, get rid of it, and he goes off singing as he's leaving. Now, you don't see this in the movie, but in the book, there's a few dwarves there in Bag End, and they had arrived with Gandalf, and they leave with Bilbo. And Bilbo scampers off. And of course, the next day, Frodo, Bilbo had left presents for certain hobbits, and and there's little notes on them, and kind of takes a dig at Lobelia and Otho Sackville Baggins. For Lobelia Sackville Baggins as a present on a case of silver spoons. Bilbo believed that she had acquired a good many of his spoons while he was away on his former journey. Lobelia knew that quite well. When she arrived later in the day, she took the point at once, but she also took the spoons. So last little insult from Bilbo to this shrewd, weird woman. And this is a custom that hobbits have of giving presents away that is stuff that they already own, that they don't have no use for. They call it a mathem, which is an Old English word. And of course, when Lobelia gets the gift, she insults Frodo, and of course Merry's there, and he kind of insults him a little bit. She tells Frodo, "You'll live to regret it, young fellow. Why didn't you go too? You don't belong here. You're no Baggins. You're a Brandybuck." "Did you hear that, Merry? That was an insult, if you like," said Frodo as he shut the door on her. "It was a compliment," said Merry Brandybuck. And so, of course, not true. And there's even a couple young hobbits that try to go in there and try to look for treasure and stuff, and they get kicked out. And, of course, Gandalf comes back. And, of course, Frodo first mistakes him for Lobelia because, you knock on the door or whatever, and he's like, yeah, it's probably her. She's probably got one other really nasty thing to come back and say, but it's Gandalf. I'm going to read a little bit of a conversation that Frodo and Gandalf have. Because Frodo first, he's like, man, this ring might be useful, and Gandalf's like, yeah, don't put that on. Yeah, he asks Frodo, what do you know already? Only what Bilbo told me. I have heard his story, how he found it, and how he used it on his journey, I mean. Which story, I wonder, said Gandalf. Oh, not what he told the dwarves and put in his book, said Frodo. He told me the true story soon after I came to live here. He said you had pestered him till he told you, so I had better know, too. No secrets between us, Frodo, he said, but they are not to go any further. It's mine, anyway. That's interesting, said Gandalf. Well, what did you think of it all? If you mean inventing all that about a present, well, I thought the true story much more likely, and I couldn't see the point of altering it at all. It was very unlike Bilbo to do so, anyway, and I thought it rather odd. So did I. But odd things may happen to people that have such treasures if they use them. Let it be a warning to you to be very careful with it. It may have other powers than just making you vanish when you wish. I don't understand. Neither do I, just like in the movie. And Gandalf goes away, and Frodo don't see him for a very long time. And yeah, like I mentioned, the Matham, that was an Old English word, and I thought there was a note in here, and I was going to mention what it meant, and I thought I could remember off the top of my head, and I really just couldn't. And I'm trying to think. There's a lot in this book. I love this Reader's Companion. It really is very helpful. No, I don't see it, but I know I think a Matham is a present, or it's something. But it is, yeah, you're going to see a lot of Old English words here in this book, and especially when you get to Rohan. That, definitely. But, anywho, there you go. Sorry about the length of this. They're probably all going to be like this, but it's a lot to cover. So, anyway, I hope you enjoy this video. I will be back on Monday, hopefully, with another one. I'm going to try to get some reading done this weekend. Hopefully I sound better. I mean, I'm feeling much better, but, stuff likes to linger, as you know. But, anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you all later.